2011 Formula 1 season look like if Sebastian Vettel was not there? Quite a few people have been requesting this one, so let's dive into it. We kick things off with round 1 over in Australia. Albert Park Circuit, the traditional season opener for Formula 1 these days, and when they don't go to Bahrain. And Lewis Hamilton gets the season off to a flying start as he claims pole position for the opening race of the season. Always a great way to start your season off. And that great start continues come race day as he goes on to convert that pole position into a race win for the first race of the season. So he's taking maximum points out of round 1 to get the best possible start for his championship campaign that he'll be going on, surely anyway. It's Vitaly Petrov who comes home in second place for this race for Renault, or Lotus, I'm pretty sure they were actually called now in 2011, but for lack of confusion, because there's Team Lotus further down the grid, I'm going to call them Renault and be done with it. But the Renault/Lotus driver is in second place ahead of Fernando Alonso, who rounds off the podium for Ferrari. We're off to Malaysia for the second race of the season, and Lewis Hamilton continues where he left off in Australia, really, because he takes pole position once again, but things do not go his way come race day, unfortunately. He can only translate that pole position into a P7 after things just don't go his way, and the victor spoils actually go the way of his teammate Jenson Button, making it 2 wins out of 2 for McLaren so far this season. He's finishing ahead of the man with the most podiums without a win in Formula 1, Nick Heidfeld. He reclaimed that record recently, and he isn't even on the bloody grid. Mark Webber, though, is rounding off the podium in third. But with that, let's swiftly head on over to China for the third race of the season, not the fourth race. It's off to the Shanghai International Circuit, and McLaren's strong start is continuing. They've gotten 2 poles so far this season, and Jenson Button makes it a third as he claims his first pole position of the season, this time out in China. It's a McLaren front row lockout, actually. The victor spoils do not go the way of Jenson Button come race day. He only claims P3 in the end. Mark Webber is in second place ahead of him. It's his teammate Lewis Hamilton who actually ends up claiming the race win, like he did in real life. He won this race IRL in 2011. He still wins it here. So the McLaren also a very, very strong start this season. Turkey is up next for round 4. Red Bull are going to want to be responding to McLaren's strong start. They've only got one car of Mark Webber, so the constructors is kind of out of question, but the drivers' championship is very much there. Mark Webber is going to want to be trying to take advantage of, not really take advantage, but really just get his championship challenge underway, and he makes a brilliant effort at that in Turkey as he takes pole position. It's a hat trick for him, actually. Pole, fastest lap, and race win for a dominant weekend for the Aussie driver to get his first win of the season. He's finishing ahead of Fernando Alonso in second place, and then Lewis Hamilton continuing his trend of being on the podium in every race except one of them so far this season. And now it's off to Barcelona, a track that Lewis Hamilton has a habit of going pretty well at, but in qualifying the momentum isn't going his way. It's actually swinging the way of Mark Webber, the winner of the last race. He's making it 2 pole positions on the bounce as he claims pole position for this Grand Prix, but it's only P3 for him come race day. He cannot keep up with the 2 McLarens, who just end up being too quick and claiming a 1-2 finish, with Jenson Button in second place behind his teammate Lewis Hamilton, getting 3 wins in the first 5 races. Hamilton having a brilliant start to the season, and as we take a look at how the championship is shaping up 5 rounds in, that reflects in the standings as Lewis Hamilton leads the way on 96 points. He's 11 points ahead of Mark Webber, who's in second place on 85, and then Jenson Button is rounding off the top 3 on 78 points. Fernando Alonso is currently sitting in 4th place on 63 points, while as Nick Heidfeld, who rounds out the top 5 on 32 points. He's tied with Nico Rosberg, also on 32, but Heidfeld gets ahead on count back up. He has a podium so far this season, and Rosberg does not. Felipe Massa is only 1 point behind them, so it's very close in 5th, 6th, and 7th right now. Massa's on 31 points, and then Petrov is only further 2 points back from that on 29 points. Michael Schumacher is in 9th place on 20 points, while the top 10 is being rounded off by Kamui Kobayashi on 14 points. The graph is returning once again. Here is how things are shaping up. You can see Hamilton start to this season, really. It was a little bit slow in Malaysia, he was off the podium, but other than that, he's been on the podium in every race except Malaysia, and that shows his steep rise up so far to the top of the standings. But it's early stages, anything can happen, so we're gonna have to see how this all plays out between these kind of top 4 drivers who I expect to be seeing in this championship fight. In the constructor standings, then it's McLaren with an easy lead right now of 174 points ahead of Ferrari's 94. McLaren, well, we'll have to see if anybody can challenge them this season, It's an 80-point lead they have already, and it's only after round 5. Anything can change, but will we see someone challenge them? We'll have to wait and see. Red Bull are in 3rd place on 85 points. points, 9 points behind Ferrari. And then we've Renault and Mercedes rounding off the top 5 on 61 and 52 points respectively. 6th place is going the way of Sauber on 18 points, and Force India are in 7th place on 10 points, and then Toro Rosso are ending off the podium, the 8-point scoring places on 11 points in 8th, because Williams, Team Lotus, HRT, and Marussia, or Virgin, or whatever they were called in 2011, all have no points. Round 6, it's off to the streets of Formula 1, just visited in real life, Monte Carlo, and Jenson Button ends up claiming pole position this time out, and you know what it's like in Monaco. You claim pole, you're effectively putting one hand on the winner's trophy. But he doesn't win. He actually only managed to finish 2nd place in this race. So for once, pole is not converted to a win in Monaco. The win actually goes the way of Fernando Alonso, who's won this race before. He's winning it again here for Ferrari. He's ahead of Jenson Button, as I said, in 2nd place. And Mark Webber, another previous winner of this race, he is finishing up in 3rd place. From Monaco, it's off to the next race of Formula 1 actually goes to Canada, the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix. I did a video about that race last year. Absolutely shameless plug. I'll link it below. But pole position for this race ends up going the way of Fernando Alonso, continuing where he left off in Monaco. But we all know how his race came to a close. It came to a close after a tangle with the eventual race winner Jenson Button after an insane race for him. He was through the pit lane about 6 times. I'm pretty sure he was in basically every single position there was in the race at one point or another. And it was a 4-hour long race. He wins ahead of Mark Webber in 2nd place, and Michael Schumacher ends up climbing onto the podium for the first time of his comeback. He is on the podium in P3. From Canada, it's off to Valencia for the European Grand Prix. Mark Webber was on the podium last time out, and he's taking pole position this time out, which is always a good way to start your weekend, and it's a good way to try and get a good result on Sunday, because, you know, having a good starting place kind of sometimes helps you out. But it only ends up being P2 for him come race day. Fernando Alonso ends up being just too quick, and he goes on to take the race victory in front of his home crowd, so delight for him, his 2nd win of the season, ahead of Mark Webber in 2nd place, and Lewis Hamilton making a return to the podium in P3. And now it's off to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix. The first race ever of the Formula 1 World Championship back in 1950, and Mark Webber is making it 2 pole positions in a row, but it's going to be 2 2nd places in a row for him as well, because, well, we know who won this race in real life. It was Fernando Alonso. This was actually his only actual race win in 2011. He still wins it here though, but it's not his first race win of the season, nor is it his only race win of the season, because he's had 2 previous wins so far in this video. He's winning the race on Ferrari's the 60th anniversary year, really, of Ferrari's first win back in 1951. Mark Webber's in 2nd place, and Lewis Hamilton is making it a home race podium for him. It's the same podium as the last race. And now it's off to Germany for the German Grand Prix. Mark Webber has been on a bit of a tear in qualifying recently, and he's continuing that now as he goes on to take his 3rd straight pole position. He has been really flying in qualifying, and that's helping him out. He's constantly up there, keeping that momentum up in qualifying and in the races, but like the previous few times, it doesn't turn into a race victory for him. But he's still up there, finishing in P3, and he's consistently up there, and that's going to help him come the end of the season, and come when the next time we look at the standings in a couple of seconds time, he's finishing in 3rd ahead of Fernando Alonso, who's not winning this race. So the win is actually going the way of Lewis Hamilton. He's returning to the top 10 of the podium for the first time since Spain. But now let's see how the last 5 races has shaped the Drivers' Championship. And well, thanks to his consistency, being consistently up there on the podium, Mark Webber is now leading the championship on 169 points. He is 8 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton in 2nd place on 161, and Fernando Alonso, thanks to his tear and run of form recently, he is in 3rd place now on 156 points. Jenson Button has slipped backwards to 4th place on 131 points, but there's still plenty of season left for him to come back and make a challenge, really, to the top 3, which I'm sure he will. Felipe Massa is rounding out the top 5 on 77 points, while Nico Rosberg is on 60 points in 6th place. Nick Heidfeld is on 46 points in 7th place, and then Michael Schumacher has gained 1 place up to 8th on 45 points. 2 points further back from that is Vitaly Petrov on 43 points, and then Kamui Kobayashi is still rounding out the top 10 on 38 points. And you can see how the Drivers' Championship fight is shaping up here on the graph. Jenson Button with his couple of DNFs there the last couple of races, which hasn't really helped him out all that much, and he's fallen way behind. But you can see how much Mark Mark Webber just steadily rolls with his consistency being on the podium. You know, he hasn't won since round 4, but he's been consistently on the podium, and that's helping him out. Fernando Alonso's meteoric rise, and then Lewis Hamilton being up there involved as well. So it's going to be a good fight throughout the rest of the season, I think. And in the Constructors' Championship, it's still McLaren leading the way on 292 points. They have about a 60 point gap back to Ferrari on 233 points. Red Bull are in third place on 169 points, while it's still Mercedes and Renault, but the other way around now, closing out the top 5 on 105 points for Mercedes and 89 for Renault. 6th place is 52 points for Sauber, and then in 7th place you'll find Force India on 33 points. Toro Rosso are still in 8th place on 29 points, and Williams are still in 9th, but they do have points on the board now with 8 points. And then Team Lotus, HRT, and Marussia are still yet to get off the ground because they're a little bit rubbish. Also, just gonna throw it in here mid-video, as I always do. Well, not really mid-video, but some point in the video. If you're enjoying this video and want to stick around for more of my Formula 1 content, then do hit the subscribe button to see more of this series. As ever, here's the list of all the ones I've done so far. Up next, I have ideas for 2009. Might take a look at 2010 first, though. See what I can do with other years as well. Like, you know the drill by now if you've been here a while. But subscribe if you're new around here to stick around for more. Drop a like on the video, it really helps out. Drop a comment as well, let me know your thoughts. But now let's get back to it. Now we move on to the final race before the summer break, the Hungarian Grand Prix. A track that, as I've said in a few of these, Hamilton tends to go quite well around here. And he's gone quite well in qualifying this season, and he's shown that this time as he takes pole position for this Grand Prix. But the win has actually ended up going the way of his teammate. Jenson Button won this race in real life, his 200th race, if I'm not mistaken, in Formula 1. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this was his 200th race. He celebrates it with a race win. Button is winning ahead of Fernando Alonso in 2nd place, and then Lewis Hamilton does manage to stay in the top 3. He's finishing in 3rd place. And now, after everybody takes a break for a couple of weeks and they go off to wherever the bloody hell they go to in the summer break, we're off to Belgium for the Belgian Grand Prix. A racetrack where we see Lewis Hamilton taking pole position once again in this season. 2 poles in a row for him now. However, things don't quite go his way on Sunday, and he ends up with a DNF against his name, his 2nd DNF of the season. His teammate doesn't manage to win either. He only finishes in 2nd place ahead of Fernando Alonso in 3rd. The win goes the way of Mark Webber, only Webber's 2nd race win of the season. But he's been consistently up there. I mean, he's been on the podium in every single race except for Australia and Hungary, where he finished P4. He's being so consistent, and that's really going to help him out in the championship, outscoring his rivals and being consistent. And you good there, Adrian? And now it's off to the Temple of Speed, the Italian Grand Prix, Monza, a circuit that I love, a circuit where the Tifosi will be hoping to see Fernando Alonso or Felipe Massa pull in a strong result. But in qualifying, then McLaren spoils the Ferrari party as Lewis Hamilton takes pole position for this Grand Prix, continuing his strong run of form in qualifying. 3 poles in a row for him, but it's only 3rd place for him come race day. The spoils go the way of his teammate Jenson Button. McLaren still spoiling the Ferrari party because, well, Fernando Alonso is in between them. He can't quite get the win from Jenson, but he's a bit too quick for him, and Alonso is the meat in a McLaren sandwich. And now, after the final race of the European season, we go over to Asia, to Singapore for the Singapore Grand Prix. Personally, one of my favorite races of the season. I don't know about anybody else, but I mean, I just love this track. And Mark Webber brings an end to Hamilton's qualifying run as Webber goes on to claim pole position for this Grand Prix. He's also been quite strong in qualifying this year, and he's shown that on the streets of Singapore. But Singapore is not quite as bad as Monaco when it comes to how tight it is. You can definitely overtake a bit easier in Singapore, and Jenson Button does that to good effect as he takes a 2nd consecutive win for his, like, what, 4th, 5th win of the season, if I'm not mistaken. Jenson Button doing good for his championship challenge. He's outscoring Mark Webber by 7 points, and then Fernando Alonso as well, outscoring him as well by 10 points as he finishes off in 3rd place, and Hamilton just off the podium in 4th. But now, speaking about positions in the championship and points and all that, let's have a look and see how things are shaping up right now in the championship after round 14. And we have got a tie at the top of the standings. Jenson Button leads the way on 224 points, and Mark Webber is tied with him, also on 224. Jenson gets the place, however, he is leading on countback of he's won more races this season. He's got 5 wins to Webber's 2. Fernando Alonso's only 2 points back from them as well, so it's very close. It's closer than a gnat's eyelash up at the top of the standings. Only 2 points separating the top 3, and then Lewis Hamilton is only a further 19 points behind his former teammate Fernando Alonso in in 4th place on 203 points. So it's all still to play for up at the top. Felipe Massa is rounding off the top 5 on 103 points, and then Nico Rosberg is 6th on 82. Michael Schumacher is finding himself in 7th place on 69 points, and then Vitaly Petrov is on 47 points in 8th. Nick Heidfeld, despite not being on the grid anymore, is still in the top 10 on 46 points, and then Adrian Sutil has now kicked Kamui Kobayashi out the top 10, and he is in 10th on 42 points. You can see here how much things have closed up at the top in the championship. You can see Fernando Alonso's a steady rise, and then Mark Webber kind of stagnating a bit with a DNF through his name, but other than that, he's been steadily rising as well. Jensen's rocket up the order in the last few races as well to get himself right there involved in Hamilton. Kind of fallen back a little bit, but he's still very much in this championship fight with 5 races to go. Anything can happen. I mean, for God's sake, in the last video of this, then with 3 races to go, Jensen Button with 49 points off the championship lead. He won by 1 point. I'm just saying, anything can happen. But now in the Constructors' Championship, it's an easy lead for McLaren, 427 points, playing Ferrari's 329. McLaren are very, very close to winning the Constructors' Championship. It's going to be a matter of races. And then Red Bull are rounding off the top 3 on 224 points. Mercedes are in 4th on 151 points, and then Renault, Lotus are in 5th place on 97. Force India are the team in 6th place on 72 points, while Sauber are in 7th on 55 points. Toro Rosso are still in 8th on 47, then Williams are on 12 points in 9th, and then the bottom 3 teams still have nothing. But now let's head on over to the Japanese Grand Prix, a race where I think a lot of Japanese fans were quite happy to see Formula 1 still go to Japan in 2011, of course, after the disasters that happened earlier in the year, or earlier in 2011 in Japan. But it's absolute delight for the championship leader as Jensen Button gets a hat-trick this weekend. Pole position, fastest lap, and race win for the man who, at the time, I believe had a Japanese girlfriend, so rather fitting that he wins the race from pole with the fastest lap as well, outscoring all of his rivals. Fernando Alonso finishing in 2nd place, and then Mark Webber, who was tied with him, and now losing out 10 points to him as he finishes off in 3rd place, and Hamilton again, consecutive 4th place finishes for the British driver. And now as we head on into the Korean Grand Prix for the next race of the season, McLaren can win the Constructors' Championship this race. There's 129 points left available after this race, and McLaren currently have a 109 point lead over Ferrari. So basically, if the gap is, if they outscore Ferrari by what, 21 points or more, then they are Constructors champions for the however many at the time. But if they can achieve that this weekend, we'll have to see how things play out. McLaren make a brilliant start of their weekend effort to try and claim the Constructors as they take pole position with Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton getting back on pole position after a few rounds of not being on pole and a couple of rounds off the podium as well. And Hamilton will make good effect of that pole position because he holds on to the P1 place on race day as he wins the Grand Prix with his teammate finishing in 3rd place. However, those 40 points are not quite enough for the Constructors' Championship, with the 2 Ferraris of Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa finishing in 4th and 5th place respectively. That puts the gap at 127 points, so not quite enough. So they're gonna have to wait till the next race to do that. But now let's head on into the Indian Grand Prix, and again, McLaren can win the Constructors. There's 86 points left after this race. They have a gap of 127 to Ferrari. So basically, Ferrari to bring it to the next race, they would need a 1-2 with McLaren failing to score, basically. And I'm gonna be honest, that's a little unlikely to happen. But the pole position goes the way of the man who finished the last race in 2nd place, Mark Webber, taking pole position. He's been very, very strong in qualifying this season, and that is continuing this time out. Mark Webber claiming pole position, but come race day, Fernando Alonso and Jensen Button are just a bit too quick for him, and Webber ends up falling backwards to finishing in 3rd place behind Fernando Alonso and the eventual race winner, Jensen Button. Button, he's been consistent. He's been on the podium in every race since Hungary, and that's doing wonders for his championship challenge. He's got a good lead at the moment. Can he hold on to it in the final 2 races? We're gonna have to wait and see. But with Button's win and Hamilton finishing in 6th place, that is the Constructors' Championship wrapped up for McLaren. So now they don't have to worry about that. They can focus entirely on the Drivers' Championship because they've won the Constructors. And now we head into the season finale at Abu Dhabi, where Jensen Button comes into this race with a 17-point lead over Mark Webber, who is on 272 points. Button on 289, and then Alonso on 270. Hamilton's already out of contention, so it's really just those 2 Jensen has to worry about. And with a gap of 17 and 19 points respectively, he can win the Drivers' Championship this time out if he outscores them by enough points. But we'll have to see what happens. He has to face qualifying first, and in qualifying it's his teammate that spoils things for him, as Hamilton ends up taking pole position. This is a track he can go quite well around Abu Dhabi, and he's showing that this time. He goes on to win the race. He holds on to that P1 place. So Hamilton winning the race ahead of Fernando Alonso, so taking some points off of Fernando, I suppose, but Fernando does still outscore Button, although Button does outscore Webber, so that's still, it's good and bad for Button, who finishes off in third place behind Fernando Alonso. It still means, though, that there's everything is still to play for into the final race of the season. So let's just have a look at what battles we still have going on right now. Jenson Button is leading the World Championship on 304 points. Fernando Alonso is in second place on 288. So Button has a lead of, what, 16 points right now, heading into the final race of the season over Fernando Alonso. Then he has a 20-point gap over Mark Webber. It's advantage Button. He's got kind of almost got one hand on the winner's trophy, the championship trophy. He's in a good place heading into Brazil. That's the main thing for him. But the thing is, with Alonso and Webber, they do still have Hamilton to worry about, because Hamilton's on 273 points, so he's still in touching distance for that second place. He's out of distance for the championship, but he's still there for second place. We'll have to see how he can do in this final race and how things work out in the battle for between first and fourth place. And you can see here on the graph the way that Button's lead has just got a bit of a lead in these closing races, much different to the last episode of this, where he was the underdog heading into the final race, you know? But he's got the advantage this time. It's advantage Button, but there's other battles going on elsewhere. Those do not include Felipe Massa, who is currently confirmed to be finishing in 5th place, currently sitting on 135 points. But the battle for 6th place, aka the Silver War 0.1, the beta version, is currently raging on. 108 points for Rosberg, playing 97 for Schumacher. So 11 points between those two, all to play for in the battle for 6th and 7th place between those two. We'll have to see how things work out there. And elsewhere, we have a battle going on between 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. 10th place is Nick Heidfeld. He's not on the grid right now, so he's can't do anything to see if he can stay in the top 10. But Kamui Kobayashi can do a lot to see if he can get himself back into the top 10. He's on 40 points, and he's trying to catch up to Vitaly Petrov in 8th place on 56 points, and then Adrian Sutil on 48 points in 9th. And then there is the rest of the grid who have scored points, and then there is all the rest who have not scored points. Then in the Constructors' Championship, there's not quite as much going on. McLaren, of course, is already Constructors' Champions on 577 points, and then Ferrari are confirmed to be finishing in 2nd place on 423 points, and likewise Red Bull and Mercedes are also confirmed in their respective places of 3rd and 4th on 284 and 205 respectively. Renault, Lotus, or Lotus Renault, are on 106 points, confirmed in 6th place, or 3rd and 4th, and 5th place for Mercedes, 6th place for Renault, 5th place for Renault, sorry. I'm losing my mind here. They're on 106 points. And Force India, they're not out of the woods from Sauber yet. And Force India could catch Renault. They're not a million miles behind, but it would take a lot for them. So they're kind of confirmed there. But Sauber, they're not safe. Their biggest worry is going to be Toro Rosso, who are just one singular point behind them. 64 points playing 63. Going to be really interesting to see what plays out there, who can get ahead of who can stay ahead of who. But then you have Williams still on 12 points, and then the other two are still on nothing. But now let's head on into the final race of the season, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It's advantage Mark Webber in qualifying as he goes on to take pole position for this Grand Prix. But to win the championship, he's 20 points behind Button right now, so he would really need to win the race with Button scoring not very many points. He would need Button to be finishing in 8th or lower if my mental maths is mathing properly. And Mark Webber does go on to win the Grand Prix. However, Jenson Button finishes in 2nd place, which means he is world champion in this season. He finished 2nd in the championship in real life, and he wins the championship in this series when you take Sebastian Vettel out of it. Congratulations to Jenson Button. You are world champion, my friend. But Mark Webber's win against Fernando Alonso's 3rd place means that Webber wins out in the battle for 2nd place, and Alonso has to settle for 3rd place until Hamilton, with that last race, DNF, will have to end up settling for 4th place in the end. In the battle of Mercedes, then Nico Rosberg 6th place finish ends up handing him 6th place in the championship as Michael Schumacher fails to score anything this race. And then in the battle of 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, Adrian Sutil 5th does score 10 10 points from finishing in 5th place, but Vitaly Petrov also scores 2 points, which allows Petrov to hold on to that 8th place. And Kamui Kobayashi's 8th place isn't quite enough to get him into the top 10. But now let's have one final run through the Drivers and Constructors Championship standings. Jenson Button is world champion in 2011 without Sebastian Vettel. After a brilliant season, the Briton finishes on 322 points. He is finishing ahead of Mark Webber, who had to settle for 2nd place in the end after a very consistent season. And you'll see in a minute, he actually had the most podiums this season. He's on 309 points, 6 points ahead of Fernando Alonso on 303 points. Lewis Hamilton is going to have to settle for 4th place on 273 points, while Felipe Massa is over 100 points behind him, rounding up the top 5 on 147. Nico Rosberg wins out in the battle of the Mercedes boys on 116 points in 6th place, while Michael Schumacher finishes on 97 points in 7th. Vitaly Petrov and Adrian Sutil in 8th and 9th are tied on 58 points, but Petrov gets ahead on countback of he has got a podium this season and Sutil did not. Nick Heidfeld is now rounding up the top 10 on 46 points. He's 2 points ahead of Kamui Kobayashi, who's the first driver outside the top 10 on 44 points in 11th place. Paul di Resta and Jaime Alguersuari are both on 40 points in 12th and 13th, but di Resta gets ahead on countback of he has a higher place position than Alguersuari. And we also have a tie between Sergio Perez and Sebastian Buemi in 14th and 15th place, both on 24 points, but again, count back for Perez, he gets ahead. Rubens Barrichello scores just 8 points for Williams in 16th place, while for Bruno Senna and Pastor Maldonado in 17th and 18th, they are tied on 4 points apiece, and they're the last of the point scorers that we had this season, because Pedro Della Rosa, Jarno Trulli, Heikki Kovalainen, Vitantonio Liuzzi, Jerome D'Ambrosio, Timo Glock, Narain Carthagena, Daniel Ricciardo, and Karun Chandok all scored nothing. In the Constructors' Championship, the McLaren are Constructors' champions on 595 points. They kind of went unchallenged all year in the Constructors' Championship, really. Ferrari, though, are in 2nd place, about 150 or so points behind them on 450 points. Red Bull round out the top 3 and 309 points, while you have Mercedes in 4th place on 213 points, while 5th place you'll find Renault on 108 points. Force India are in 6th place on 98 points, while in 7th place you're going to find Sauber on 68 points. They went out against Toro Rosso by just 4 points, Toro Rosso having to settle for 64 points. Williams are still on the 12 points that they've been on the last since for like half the bloody season, and then they're the last of the point scorers because Team Lotus, HRT, and Virgin, or Marussia, or whatever you want to call them, they all scored nothing. Here's your end of season stats then. We had 4 different race winners this season. The most wins went the way of Jenson Button, scoring 7 race wins across the season. Then Lewis Hamilton is in 2nd place in that chart with 6 race wins to his name, and then it was 3 wins apiece for Mark Webber and Fernando Alonso. And of course that means all 4 of those drivers also scored podiums, but we also had 3 additional podium sitters this season to bring us up to 7 different podium finishers. The most podiums, as I said, went the way of Mark Webber with 15 total podium finishes, 1 more than Jenson Button and Fernando Alonso, who both had 14 podiums this season. Lewis Hamilton scored 11 podiums this season, while it was 1 podium for Michael Schumacher, 1 podium for Vitaly Petrov, and then 1 podium for Nick Heidfeld. And then finally we had 4 different pole sitters as well. The pole king, or pole kings, I suppose you could say, was Mark Webber and Lewis Hamilton, both ending the year with 7 pole positions apiece. And then we have Jenson Button with 3 pole positions, and then Fernando Alonso on just 1 singular pole position. And with that, 2011 without Sebastian Vettel is at its end. That's what would have happened. There's everything laid out in this series. Up next, 2010, I think. I did see someone suggest something for 2022 that I might take a look at and circle back to, because I haven't done 2022 yet, because I couldn't think of something, but might have something from a suggestion that someone made in some video in the comment section. But yeah, that's the state of play. So up next, 2010, or possibly circling back to 2022? Who knows? That's for another day. For now, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.